My name's Peter Brad. I'm co-founder and CEO of the Beanstalk Factory, which is an innovation consultancy business. I am a tech entrepreneur. I created a business called ScribblePix and partnered with Qantas to co-develop that product and distribute it through to their customers. It's something I did when I was 22, and it's still live on the Qantas mobile store. I then was founding director and CEO of Fishburners, which is a co-working space out of Sydney, which I led for about 3 years, set it up as a charity. I then formed another company, Startup Oz, with Alan Noble, who's the engineering director at Google, and Bill Barty, that's one of the venture capitalists, and also another charity, which was an advocacy group for startups, and we worked quite heavily with the federal government primarily on making policy change. And then I've teamed up with Jack Delosa of the Entourage to form this company, the Beanstalk Factory. The Entourage is the largest educator of entrepreneurs in Australia. He's got about 300,000 Australians that are on his, go through his programs and listen to what he sort of has to talk about. Today is an interactive session, so I'm going to be, as host, asking a couple of questions. But if you have downloaded the app, you need to go to open it, click interactive sessions, click on the title of today, which is The Big Bang, Corporates, Tech and Innovation Collide. And then up the top right-hand corner, there will be questions. And you can start submitting questions, and somebody is moderating them, and we'll get to them later on. So please, as we're talking, if you've got questions for any of the panelists, that's how you get them to us. I'm going to hand over to the panel now. We'll start with Erica, and just do quick introductions of who we are.
Sure. My name's Erica Hughes. I consult primarily to largish corporates around how you actually embrace disruption. So I take them through the journey where they usually start being quite fearful and putting up a lot of barriers around disruption, and I help them through that cultural journey. One of the key ways that we do that is to establish internal disruptors within the corporates and create an ecosystem and a couple of very small test and learns to actually encourage the organisation to learn that with partnering with startups, partnering with the kind of startup ecosystem, introducing design thinking, co-creating with startups and customers, you can actually get a minimal viable product to market very quickly, usually in 6 to 8 weeks, and you can test and learn that new way of working and then spread that through your organisation. So I take them through the journey of disrupting themselves because certainly we're all well aware that a lot of these big corporates are ripe for disruption and they are fearful of it. So that's my story.
And my name is Don Meii, and I'm the CEO and Group Managing Director for Domino's Pizza Enterprises. We operate Domino's in 7 countries. We're an ASX-listed company, roughly about 60th in the 100. And you know what can be quite a commoditised market. Differentiation and innovating has been a big driver of why we've been able to not only become the market leader in 6 of those 7 countries, based out of here in Brisbane, but we're actually also growing beyond pizza. In other words, we're growing a lot of different businesses in the business and stealing share from other food categories.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Manju, and I work for a company called SAP. Hopefully, some of you, if not all of you, may be familiar with SAP. I run SAP's startup engagement globally through a program called SAP Startup Focus. And the objective of the program is very simple. We go looking for external startup-led innovation that exists in small companies around the world. And through the process that we have created, bring that innovation to our largest enterprise customers. So the intent really is to go, my job is to go looking for startups, bringing them on to build their applications and solutions in our technology, validating those, and then introducing those and making the sales transactions for these startups to our largest customers. We have 3,200 startups in 57 countries that I work with, and we did more than a deal a week. In other words, my startup sold more than a deal a week every week for the last 54 or 58 weeks, all of 2015 for sure. So this program has been around for since 2012, and I've been with SAP for a long time. And before I came to SAP in my prior life, I was the founder of 2 startups. One went well, one, shall we say, less so. So thank you very much.
Hi, Andrew Fox. I work for a company called VMware. We're listed in the US. Silicon Valley startup company, 17 years young. In our history, we were the fastest startup company to hit $1 billion, which is a claim I think we can still adhere to. But what is more exciting from my perspective is that I work for a startup within that startup, and that startup is the end-user computing division, where we are digitally disrupting ourselves. And what we're trying to do is to help our customers understand the digital transformation that's occurring in their industries and providing them with a path to that future. Peter, all yours.
Awesome. So the topic of today, Big Bang, corporates, tech and innovation collide. The sort of, if you haven't read what we're talking about, it's small and agile beats big and slow, but big and agile beats everyone. One of the facts they had in there was 227 of the companies on the Fortune 500 list just 10 years ago are no longer on the list, which is almost 50%. This question that we're going to be talking about is how are incumbent companies tapping into the perfect storm of disruption to laying claim to the future markets. I'm just going to run through a quick slide. This is something I'd normally do over about an hour. I'm going to do it in about 5 minutes, so you can ask me questions later on. Just about to set the scene for what Australian companies and companies like Google and GE are doing around innovation approaches. So there's quite a few there. There's corporate accelerators, and Eric is going to talk about the Westpac Garage project a little bit later on, corporate venturing, open innovation, and there's a few things that corporates do around open innovation, such as co-creation, similar to what I did with Qantas with our postcard business, open innovation contests. Blue Chili do a lot of contests. Skunk works, labs, platforms like Commonwealth Bank Pi or the Atlassian store, internal contests, so Foundry events and hackathons and things like that. External ideas platforms, so Telstra's got an interesting one called Telstra Crowd Support, which is where they generate a lot of ideas from their customers, and we're going to be talking about, Don talks about tension points, and Steve Wozniak yesterday was talking about empathy-led innovation and how we can harness ideas from our customers, and then internal ideas platforms as well. In terms of what I've seen with leverage areas, one of the products that we have is an innovation review, and we look at all of these areas inside an organisation and try and work out what's pushing an organisation forward and what's holding it back. Often I find that in an organisation, and I think Kurt mentioned this yesterday, a lot of organisations don't have an innovation approach. And if they do, that innovation approach isn't widely understood within their organisation. Often they don't have the right people. Their culture, which is a result of a number of things, often is telling around innovation. Some of the processes aren't in place around how they innovate, and we'll discuss as well sort of what innovation means, because it is quite a broad word. Governance, tools, location, co-location, how things are measured, and the leadership style, and also the org structures are sort of areas that we look at that you need to get right or improve upon to be successful. It's just a quick sort of fact. With corporate accelerators, there have been over 105 launched in the last 3 years, and 50 of those were launched last year. Airbus, Barclays, Google, Telstra have launched in the last 12 months, and Techstars and Startup Bootcamp are probably two of the biggest providers in the world for those. And Deloitte's got a really interesting paper on corporate acceleration if you want to jump online and check it out. In Australia, corporate venture funds, there's quite a lot. Telstra, Westpac has Reinventure, Optus has Innovate. Australia Post has just launched one with $20 million for Melbourne Accelerator program, and they've got another $80 million to go. NAB Ventures got their $50 million one, and there's other venture funds that are up there. I couldn't put them all up, but with open innovation, there's a few different sort of areas. I don't know if anyone heard of the Netflix Prize, but it was where Netflix realised that they couldn't improve their recommendation algorithm by more than, they could do as much as they could do, but they gave $1 million away every year to a person or a group of people that could improve their recommendation algorithm by more than 10%. Has anyone heard of Kaggle? It's a Melbourne-based platform. Colin, my ally in the audience. Kaggle's a sort of a data analytics platform which helps you find people to solve your data problems. So it's an open innovation platform. You can put your data contests up there and tap into data scientists and people around the world to help you solve those problems. With open innovation contests, Blue Chili, has anyone heard of Blue Chili? Quite a few of you. So they run a number of things. Seb from Blue Chili is probably one of the reasons most people are confused in the ecosystem around what like an accelerator or an incubator is, or a co-working space, because he's everything. They run contests. They've done it for Westpac. This particular one is for Pernod Ricard, where they set up a challenge, and startups from around the world can apply for the challenge, and then depending on what happens, this particular one had a $35,000 cash prize from Blue Chili and Pernod Ricard, and then they went through the Blue Chili Accelerator program to move forward. South Australian startup won that recently. With Skunk Works, there's quite a few around. Westfield set up Westfield Labs in Silicon Valley, rumoured to have probably invested about $50 million into that, and I've been told they're bringing it back here to Australia because the distance was a bit too deep for them. Other Australian companies have labs, and Don, you spoke about your lab yesterday in your talk. Obviously, Commonwealth Bank has their lab. Westpac has something called the Hive. Platforms, Commonwealth Bank has their Pi platform. Atlassian was interesting. I saw Mike Cannon-Brookes tweet out recently that they just hit $100 million in revenue from their platform. And that is developers creating software for customers of Atlassian that Atlassian themselves don't have the resources or the desire to create. And the guys at Atlassian have done the 30% model, and they've made $30 million out of it. But that's software that their customers need and want that they've allowed people to create. Internal contests, so AMP is probably one of the most advanced in Australia. They've got their Amplify contest, which they do. There's also News Corp run News Foundry 54 annually as well. And this is where staff internally compete either through an ideas contest or a hackathon if they've got a big enough developer team around a contest, generally over around 54 hours or a week. You've got internal ideas platforms. Spigot's one of about 15 of those. I think the Commonwealth Bank uses it from memory. It's a way to harness ideas from your staff. And then external ideas platforms as well, which Telstra uses with their crowd support. So what we're going to do now is sort of jump into some questions from me for the panel and share their experience. And then if you have just come in, we need you to open the app for the event and go to the interactive session menu icon and tap on today's session, and then you can start submitting questions. And in sort of maybe 20 minutes, we'll start taking questions from the audience, but that's how you ask the panel questions. So maybe we'll start with Erica and talking about your experience with Westpac and the Garage project. Could you give us a bit of a story about what you achieved there?
Sure. So I might start with the story about how we actually set it up. So it's an internal agitator, if you like, an accelerator. So my role at Westpac was to run their change and transformation programs. So there's about 200 programs of work per year with an investment of about $1 billion of rolling new products and services to market. Some of them are regulatory, that sort of thing. It became very evident at Westpac that they're very, very slow to market. They spend an awful lot of money on the business case. There is very heavy governance in terms of steercos. Decisions are made very slowly and by committee, and so things were taking a very long time to market. And then there was a very telling example at Westpac where about 4 years ago, they had an idea for what was going to be quite an innovative product in the market. They talked about it for a year. They then spent about another year building a business case. They then put it on hold for a while. Then they reinvigorated it. Then they started to do some build. So 4 years from the original idea to when it was due to launch in market. One of their main competitors got wind of the fact that Westpac was developing this product. They started their program in February, and they launched in April, which was 1 month before we were due to launch. And this became the burning platform within the organisation that we really had to change the way we did things. So we had to change the way we ran programs, but we had to change our culture and our thinking. We had to be willing to partner externally. We had to have a culture of test and learn and fail fast, and there's no shame in that. And we had to create an ecosystem where we could bring in external partners, and some of these are fintechs, the people that are trying to disrupt us, to actually get stuff to market quickly. But then as the accelerator kind of grows within the organisation, it's about capturing new markets, and it's about almost disrupting yourself, and sometimes that means cannibalising your own book to create a much bigger market. So that was the journey that we went on at Westpac.
Really interesting. Andrew, part of the conversation is around the perfect storm of disruption. We chatted about this a little bit backstage. Could you shed some light on how you describe the sort of perfect storm of disruption?
Sure. So at the moment, a lot of the large enterprises around the world are faced by the reality that their businesses are somewhat static, and they're looking forwards and wondering whether what's happened to the taxi industry with Uber, or what's happened to the accommodation industry with Airbnb, or the video industry with Netflix is going to happen to them. So a lot of organizations are trying to innovate structurally rather than trying to innovate from a product point of view. And this is something that is digital transformation, digital disruption, whatever terminology you want to put on it. But it's very important that those organizations look over the horizon and engage with their customers to see what the customers are going to want from them in order to be able to survive. And I think that's what's driving a lot of corporate thinking at the moment.
Awesome. So yesterday, did anyone see Don speak yesterday afternoon? A lot of you? I was really impressed, and we're lucky to have him back again. Steve Wozniak, also on yesterday morning, was speaking a lot around empathy and understanding pain points. Don, you spoke about them as tensions. Can you give us some insight into how Domino's uses tensions or pain points as a spark for innovation?
Yeah, so we look inside the business at problems or challenges, which are friction points, tensions, and we look outside when you're looking at what customers are saying. So, when I order a pizza, when's it going to arrive? Or, customizing their own pizza as you get on a digital device. And, those sort of tensions, we go and try and build digital solutions, or we innovate with new thinking. For another example of that is that when you look at all the things we sell, and some of the trends in food, sometimes you can see where there's going to be a new enemy, for example, in our product. So whilst we've got to be careful of being too early to market, because too early to market nobody buys it and it's hard to keep it going, and you've got to keep things fresh. But where is that pivot point where there's enough customers? Like when we brought in gluten-free. Gluten-free was an enabler for a small number of people, but those small number of people dictated, because pizza's a shared food, a larger volume of customers. Because if you couldn't have gluten-free, you couldn't have pizza in the house, we weren't going to have pizza because it would be a pretty uncomfortable circumstance, or maybe at an office. So, just looking at these sort of tensions and going a little bit beyond what they could mean. Sometimes buying, we did some work with Google, that it wasn't just the one-time purchase through AdWords, but how many multiple times did we actually, once we also got that customer, because we would have got details about them, and then what was that worth to us? So the whole bigger picture that leads from that. So, yeah, just looking at future consumer friction or tension or internally, and then trying to come up with solutions to that. Or even if they're just bigger business solutions, we're so big in pizza, does pizza deserve a bigger part of the market? How do you go about that? So we'll do a David and Goliath position. So that, some of the Goliaths, hamburgers, fried chicken, what drives their business? 60% drive-through. We're not going to come up with drive-throughs because that's a old world solution. What's the new world solution? Why do you go for a drive-through? It's the ultimate convenience for those, but is there a new convenience? And how do you conquer that with the digital solution? And often, all of a sudden, you shift the paradigm so hard against those players that how do they now change? Because their strength is now becoming a liability really quickly. And that's from product to platforms to just efficient technology inside to make us more productive and so on.
Awesome. I really loved your story yesterday, Don, where you were talking about you used to be a pizza delivery driver and you bought in and you ended up being the CEO and one of the major shareholders. And obviously you drive a lot of the innovation and you're lucky to have great people inside Domino's that help you with that.
Yes.
Erica, when you're at Westpac, how important was it to get sort of CEO or senior level support to enable you to move forward with what you wanted to do?
It's incredibly important. So it's very hard to create that culture and drive that culture many, many layers down. You've got to have quite senior executive support, and you've got to really maintain the momentum of that support and that sponsorship throughout your program. And you've got to be sort of, you know, one of the things I talk about when I talk about the Westpac Garage is the extent to which we just showed it off. So you almost are doing your own media and PR campaign about the successes that you're having, or even some of the failures that you have, if that's one of the cultural problems that you're trying to tackle. And you've got to have an environment where you encourage your senior executives to drop in all the time and actually see the energy and seeing what's being delivered to market. If you don't have that, it's a slog, quite frankly.
I met Josh from River City Labs last night, and he was talking about hippos, and he said the highest paid person with an opinion in the room. And Don, we were talking yesterday on the phone about, you said the smartest person in the room was the person that could convince the most people, and talking about storytelling and the like. Could you give us some sort of tangible tips on how to influence the
I think that like highly intelligent people who can solve problems have an innate problem is that they overcomplicate things. Because they're so smart, they can see so much, but the average other person who may not be in that field, but maybe the end consumer is going to want to need that, just doesn't get a bunch of graphs and a bunch of flowcharts going off at 1,000,000 miles an hour and fancy terms. Our strategy director or marketing director, Alan Collins, he's really big on get rid of the big words. What does that mean? Why do you have to say that? Can you not say something simply and so on? So, the smartest person in the room, and you'll meet them, we're obviously a public company, and you'll meet in banker environments where people go in there and they, you're looking at a business and it's just this whole heap of waffle. And you can tell everybody shut off. But then the person who can make it happen is the person who just says, it's like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's this, it's like that, and everybody, got it. That's why we should be doing it. Like if you're going to take on, naturally, you're going to take on an Amazon, you're going to take on a Google, you're going to take on a Coca-Cola in something you might be doing. Well, everyone in the room is going to say, what? I mean, how are we going to... But then here's why. Here's their Achilles heel, and they're doing nothing about it. So why don't we do it? Okay, and we can. Here's how we could do it. Wow, that easy? Yeah, why not? And, then let's go into design thinking, let's go into prototyping, minimal by product, and see if we've got something. Because opinions can be, dangerous either way. But,
yes.
The great thing is that it's not always money, although money is important with some of the really big projects. But some of the best things that happen in the business happen so cheaply with just thinking and getting people to just think simply through problems.
I think, what I'd add to that is the smaller your budget, when you're doing an internal accelerator or agitator, the smaller the budget, the better, actually. Because particularly in financial services, programs become so big that they almost can't fail. You plough on with them because of the amount of money that you've put in. The best thing that you can do is pick small projects and give them hardly any money and hardly any time, and you'll be amazed at what people can come up with.
And it's important who you staff them with.
Yeah.
I mean, if you find 10 people of my age and stick them in a room, we're going to come up with stuff that we thought of before. Our history is against us in terms of innovation. But if you find 10 people fresh out of whatever education institution they've come from and give them no parameters and just ask for free thinking, you get some really transformational ideas. And I think that's the place to look. But just trust them, let them go. Right?
Yeah.
I've heard that point a few times through a number of the other sessions, is to hire grads, hire them young, hire them fresh, with outside eyes. Manju, let's bring you into the conversation.
So I work with only software startups for the most part, 95, 98%. There's a few hardware guys involved in IoT and stuff, Internet of Things. But, quick show of hands. How many of you guys in the audience are actual startups? Running one, part of one, wanting to be one? Oh, that's huge. Thank you. So the way most of our startups get engaged with large customers is really through either they start off with the minimum viable product, evolve it into a proof of concept, and the actual fully baked baby, so to speak, is several miles down the street. But if you can convince somebody of the power of the innate idea without getting into what Don was mentioning about complex issues, the customer is smart. He knows what he's looking for. Either it's a white space he wants you to fill, either what you have that's not working too well that needs to be improved, or there's brand new technology coming in the horizon that needs to be addressed today because of a futuristic survival issue. Generally, one of those three categories is where the innovation fits in. And if you're not able to either make things better or cheaper on any of those three frontiers, then your startup's reason to exist is sort of dodgy at best. And those things really come down to very remarkable, simplistic ideas in some ways, even though the technology you're delivering or deploying to deliver that solution can be, and mostly is, fairly complex. And the blend of those two gets tricky. So sometimes most founders don't know where to stop. I mean, I've been in that shoes myself, and feature creep just keeps in. If I could only develop that one more thing, that guy's going to love it, and one more. Before you know, you're 3 years out, and the more agile competitor is already launched, and you're toast.
Could you, there are quite a few startups in the room, so let's talk about startups doing business with big corporates. Just open question to the panel, I suppose, some tips on how startups can engage with corporates, either through co-creation or providing software as a customer, or venture capital in terms of injecting some funds. What are some stories and tips the panel has?
Well, I'd say the fundamental driver will be partnership. I mean, don't be frightened of big corporates. We're innovation factories too, and we're looking for that innovative idea. I mean, it's not always that we're looking to acquire, or we're looking to steal your IP, or take your business structural ideas. We have several thousand technology partners in our ecosystem, and several thousand more people who work with us to push that out to customers. But we're always on the lookout for ways of extending our innovation platform across the community. So, don't be frightened of approaching us. Look for a big brother. There are things that we can do to you and give you routes to market and access to a much broader market that might otherwise be possible. And we're not here to take you over. We're actually here to partner.
And just want to add to what he said. There's a couple things to think about. One is issue of what I call expectation management. Be very clear in what you want out of the relationship. Just because you're small is irrelevant. You have tremendous value to add to what the customer is looking for, and ergo, you have good position of strength and bargaining. Second, be realistic in what you can get out of things given the time frame you have and the runway you have left, the money you have in the bank, the burn rate you're incurring. And therefore, to your point, we call it the Sherpa. Enterprise deal cycles are notoriously long. It'll take you 6, 8, 12, 14 months to do a deal. Do you have what it takes to last that deal? Because you got bills to pay and mouths to feed. On the other hand, don't be afraid. We actually at SAP don't want to do anything with your IP. We make you sign a contract. There's this thing that says, we will not touch any of your IP. If you have any question, you ask us, and we will tell you how it relates to what we are doing to enable you. But I don't really want to know what's under the hood for you, because that's just way too complex for me, and I don't want to get into the legal mess. So it's actually the reverse. People, I think if startups have that idea, that's a wrong idea. We don't want your technology. We have plenty of our own good ones. But we certainly, to my mind, an enterprise deal cycle is like climbing Mount Everest. You need a good Sherpa. And to your point of the big brother, find one. SAP Startup Focus exactly is a Sherpa to help you navigate that big climb that's ahead of you and to help you succeed.
I had one at Qantas when I did my deal with Qantas. There was a company called Cover Point Marketing that they'd put in place as the external provider to help me navigate through Qantas. And without that person and that process that was put in place, I never would have done a deal with Qantas. We've got a question from the audience from Alex. He says, how successful are projects between corporates and startups, and what elements make them work?
I can take that. We have, as I mentioned earlier, 3,200 startups. 1,000 of them, give or take, have been invited to do development on our platform because we deem their solutions to be the right ones that make a fit with our technology. Of those, we have, give or take, 220 that are fully validated, really running solutions. We've tested to make sure they work. But if you have a small team and you have 220 suitors, I can't take them all to all my customers. So if you're just screaming, saying, look at me, that doesn't work either. So the power of the compelling product, that has to speak for itself. But the guys who've made the cut are now within 2 years. At some point in the 2-year cycle, they were just like you, sitting in the audience, young founders. And today they're on SAP's price list. So they're doing double-digit millions of dollars in revenue on an automatic click just because they happen to be on the price list. But to get to the price list, the solution had to meet a whole bunch of criteria, which they did. So the successful, from my perspective, we have dozens, if not scores of examples of successful implementations and collaborations between a startup and a large customer. And I'm talking customers the size of Unilever, Siemens, Procter & Gamble, Norwegian state oil companies. I mean, guys, you are mammoth. And startups between 20 and 30 people a pop in terms of their size. So you can imagine a 300,000 person Siemens buying from a 30-person company. And flawless, it works beautifully. But again, you need that intermediary, that industrialized process that takes the innovation of the startup community and brings it to the large enterprise customer, because that guy is not going to buy willy-nilly from a young company, given all that is a potentially at risk.
I would probably add, I think if you're a startup, you need to have an attitude where you're willing to actually co-design and co-create with your, potential funder, and you need to come to them with a roadmap of investment and product to market or something to market. I think certainly if you come with a great idea and an ask of 20 million or 40 million, you're really not going to get there, certainly not in the financial services space. If you come with an idea that's been partially tested through some sort of minimal viable product and you're willing to kind of co-create around that and the initial investment is quite small, there's a huge appetite to listen to these ideas. Excuse me.
Awesome. Don, just going back to sort of corporate innovation, yesterday you spoke with me on the phone around what you do inside Domino's, and you've got a sort of thesis that you put out every 6 months. Can you share the story with the audience on that?
Yeah, so it started as a 12-month document, and obviously things have moved a lot faster. So, Death Without Digital, and the name's not really even appropriate now to what the content is, but it's known inside the business what it will mean, is that when is there shifts that we have to be early on? And if we're wrong, does it really matter, because we'll probably get some sort of exposure and learning from that. But if we're right, thank gosh, we were there first. We were buying mobile ads for 8 9 cents because we were first on mobile. And now they're $1, $2, $3 to acquire. So, leading in spaces and also making sure that you're relevant, because if the consumers start arriving there and you arrive second, maybe your platform won't be as used because now people have adapted to a new place to be. So when, making sure when those pivot points are happening, these are the things, and then because we're in 7 countries, making sure all the CEOs, CIOs, CMOs are across. We're in paradigm shift, we think. And therefore, we're going after this. You need to be a part of this. Your headspace needs to be in this area as well, because we're going to build it's likely to come to your markets, and this is why and how and so on. So it's part of keeping everybody on the same page. And we're not going to be always right. We've invested in some things that just didn't work, but so what? We learnt from that, and that's okay.
You spoke also yesterday around teams and team decision making, and you take teams out of Silicon Valley and alike. Can you share some sort of insight on how important team is inside a corporate for innovation? Yeah, so all tours, like we do a food tour. So we're about to go on a food tour in a few months' time, which is challenging to your health. But the idea is you take a team, because you need all the members of the team are eventually going to help bring it to life. So there might be 6, 7, or could it be as much as 15 people, because if it's a global initiative. Because that way, if everybody's seeing it at the same time and then we're coming to the agreement, we should pursue this, it's so quick. If 2 people go and you've got to sell it back for an organisation on email and video conferencing, or trying to get around and sell it, it just takes too long. So sometimes they're food, sometimes they're image. For example, new ways people are going to engage in environments. Other times they're hardware tech, going visiting some of the labs of some of the big companies around the world. And other times they're software, or they're startup communities, or they're businesses that partners we're working with, and going and forming a relationship with them just for dual learning. One was a financial services business in San Francisco, but we loved what they were doing, and we became a promoter, even though we never ended up using their product, because if they ever do come here, we want to be part of it. Vice versa, they're promoting us. So there's some of that good learning as well. And you can email people, here's a question. So really, really important to be on those exploratory trips with groups, documented actions, what we're going to do straight away, and killing it fast or succeeding fast with something, Like you said, don't burn things off in 1 or 2 weeks for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Don't wait for the millions. And, when we built Pizza Mogul, it cost $5.5 million. In hindsight, we probably could have built it for $1 million and used a lot of partners. Instead, we built the search engine, we built the bank, we built everything in there, because that's what you do, right? It was our product, it was going to be great, and hard lesson, expensive way to do things. And it's changed the way we think now. So you partner a lot more now? We do partner a lot more now, and that's in itself challenging, because the expectations of a partner coming in, how do you find, are we going to be a joint venture? Are we going to be an owner? Or are we just going to be a license of your product? And trying to find what's the right place to be there, because in some cases you do want to be the proprietary owner of it eventually. Like, no good we do all the development, then our competitors get it the next day fully developed. So how do you lock that down? What is the capital investment? Because they're going to need capital. But which way is it going to come through the business? And unrealistic expectations up front, not managed, ends up in upset business partners, for both sides.
And so big hard learning. And also we've had to grow up and learn to patent things really quickly. People patent names. We'll put out a public company report saying we think that we're going to go after drive-throughs, and all of a sudden someone patents the virtual drive-through, you know, and fortunately we weren't creating a virtual drive-through, we were creating something completely different. So, you know, but just the fact that happens, or a screenshot that we might have posted of something that's coming, also someone goes and patents the screenshot, and you go, wow, that's a whole new learning. So yeah, we've had to grow up a lot. And work with partners to make sure we're getting things patented before we talk about it. We've had to become more secretive, which is, in a transparent company, that's horrible.
Yes.
You want to talk about it to everybody while we're on the journey, because it becomes better that way. Now we've had to close it down. So yeah, we're growing up and learning every day.
Wonderful. Something I tell a lot of my clients, and the CEO of Rackspace said it quite well, was for success you need to have valued members of a winning team carrying out an inspiring mission. And I find in large companies, most people don't understand what the mission is, and they are often so far removed from the customer, the user, the person they're creating these products and services for, the person that they serve, that they almost have lost a lot of the passion for what they're doing. They're disengaged. How, in a large company, do you have that sort of, you know, founder-led or CEO-led vision down and the mission, and get your execs to carry it through right down to the people on the coalface, so that everyone is mission-led?
So we have very simple phrases in our strategic plan. So you can't write enough policies to replace trust. You know, the moment of choice, make it beautiful, because you can. You know, why does it have to look like a Samsung? Why can't it look like an iPhone? You know, because there are those moments of choice where people did have a choice to do something and have that product empathy. And bureaucracy is evil, because in our business, we're a public company, and you want to have governance. But the governors, as we get bigger, always want to just red tape it. We're big. Are we big enough now that we need more red tape? No. Are we big enough now? No. We're just never going to be that big. There is no time in history we'll be that big. So let's just keep it lean. And that's hard, you know, because you do have to protect. And so, yeah, just having simple phrases and communicating those phrases over and over again. And that, instead of writing big missions and paragraphs, and it always starts with, why do we even need to be doing this? And once we understand why, celebrate those that are making it successful in the why.
Any other panelists?
So we got our mission statement down to 6 words, and then deliberately set out to put all of our staff through some very simple training. You know, we gave them presentation prizes. We made everybody get the elevator pitch, and made the executives, you know, drive that and give them examples as to how to do it. I mean, you've got to ingrain it. You've got to create that culture.
But, you know, going beyond that, though, once people have how do you, at least at SAP, for example, we're a large company, 20 billion in revenue. They give back 6 billion in profits with a B. Fairly large, 80,000 plus people. And we have plenty of this stuff, right? But at the end of the day, what it comes down to, how does the guy who's a down-line manager, how do you get him to be motivated to do? And what we've tried to do is, one thing we realized is a department of innovation ain't going to work. I mean, let's be clear about that. So everybody has to be intrinsically motivated and empowered to be the one who does the next thing. So the first slide is shown with the, you know, internal incubation, takeoffs. We have various fellowships on my team. We actually have a global range of ambassadors who are passionate about the cause of startups. They have a day job. They keep doing it. But they volunteer their hours to supporting their startup outreach in their geography. They don't get paid. They don't get bonus. They do it because they're passionate about it. And what I do is I find ways to reward them for their support through other mechanisms. But as a result, you create this culture. So, for example, we have the Internet of Things is a big, big trend, right? And by any trend you look at, it's looking at a $16 trillion market in the next 5 years. I mean, it's humongous. We have at least 5 teams I know of, nimble teams, less than 10 people apiece, working at SAP trying to crack the same problem. And they come from it from different angles. So once you have all these kind of things across the company, across different initiatives, you create a culture of innovation that actually people, because you don't want to look bad with your colleagues and you want to be self-motivated to deliver the next big thing. And that's how we, as SAP, have found that it works really well. Yeah. But whatever you guys mentioned, first of all, to say, you know, our mission is helping the world run better. Well, what the heck does that mean? What it means when you break it down, all kinds of things, technology, platforms, solutions, innovation. I mean, the whole thing goes, but at the end of the day, there's got to be a thing that does something for your end customer that he's willing to pay top dollar for. Because if that connection is not made, everything else is waste.
Yeah. Yes.
If his pizza is burnt in the oven or the taste is bad, I don't care how much billions is invested in his business, nothing good is going to come out of it.
We're going to start moving to questions from the audience now. So we've got one here from Meii. It says, Don, you're a tech-savvy CEO. Did you think in this second machine age, a CEO must be tech-savvy?
I think you have to have empathy. So you have to, you know, when social media was becoming quite big, I mandated our leadership team had to be on Facebook because most of these guys saying, that's my daughter's doing, my son's doing, and I didn't mandate on it so they can get more friends. I mandated on it so they could literally start, you know, it's a search engine of people that they could start to learn what companies are doing things. You know, when you're about to work with a company, search them on Facebook or search them inside of Instagram or wherever else, and you'll learn a lot about that company really quickly. Because are you dealing with a company that's going to walk in the door and have a lot of empathy like us, or you're going to walk in with, that's an alien and we're going to go through all these barriers? So I think you've got to have, you don't need to know how all the guys walk in the room and they're explaining to me the cloud and, you know, and which wire is going to plug in. And I'm not really interested. I just want to know it's going to be secure and safe and we've got the best partners that, you know, and I want to know how fast it is, so how we're cutting it down, and I want to know the outcome scores, but I don't want to really know how it works to a degree. And but if you do not have empathy, if you do not understand when these new tools, as soon as these apps launch or these shifts in bots and AI, you have to go and understand it. They're like, at least, what is the consumer end of this? And, you know, a classic one for me is that I don't use Twitter. And I've never understood the business case for Twitter, so I've never invested in Twitter. I understand why people tweet, but I don't understand the business case. Still can't understand the business case, and that served me well. Never invested in Twitter, and thank God. You know, people lose a lot of money in Twitter. But at least you can be a consumer and go in there and understand why people are doing it, and where is the business case. You know, whereas the business case in Facebook, it's a media form way before it's the birth of social media. It's media. It will replace television. You know, it is like YouTube and you've got to understand this and live it. Because if you're not doing it, how will you know it? When the first person you see follows you and launches something, another brand, that you oh my gosh, there's us. We should be doing this. We could lead this. And we've missed opportunities because we didn't have empathy in our business. So, no, Instagram's not, that's not going to, so we're too slow.
Yeah, the technology is much less important than understanding what you might do with it.
Exactly, and that's just, as a CEO, you've got to just keep scanning all of these micro, macro trends that are happening. By the time Google and Microsoft are talking about it, it's too late, to be honest, because they're going to talk about it at a point, maybe not too late, but you're going to cost a lot more now. So try to be a little bit ahead of that curve and have that understanding, and then you may be partnering with those partners as well, because Google's brilliant, but you want to be a little bit earlier than that if you can.
Keep the questions rolling in. We've got one here from Joseph. Is being first to market overrated? Isn't it more important to get the customer experience, usability, features right before launching so the customer comes back to your product and wants more?
Yes to the first question, no to the second, I suspect. It's no point in being first to market if you're not also second. So getting the first customer is almost irrelevant if you're not ready to scale, you're not ready to take advantage of that. Getting the product absolutely perfect, but taking 6 months longer than you should have done is flagging to your competitors what you're about to do, and you probably won't capture the market. So defining the market is more important than being first to the market, but then being ready to own that market that you've created and defined.
And if you're working, if you're working in an industry that's very heavily regulated, you can actually kill yourself being first to market, because you'll be the one that goes through that whole regulatory approval process, and that can take, there are many startups where it's taken 18 months, 2.5 years to get the regulatory tick. Once there's one tick, the second tick can happen the next day. So you do need to be a bit careful about first to market.
I do think you want to learn with the customer. Like, it's okay to get it out there and then make the mistakes with some customers early on when it's a small number of customers, because at least you're learning with what the customer wants rather than you're second guessing, because even your data can be wrong. You can misread your data. So as much as data's king, by being in there and real customers responding and getting angry or upset, that's okay. Well, you don't blow the thing up, because you're now building it right later, but you've got the right itch because it has got that interest and it's real feedback. So you get there early fast, is my opinion.
But even in the first to market, I think there's so if you look at Google, for example, when they started, they were not the first search engine. Alta Vista, Excited Home, there's a whole bunch of them that came and were gone. So the technology shifts, which allows you to do the same thing, but tremendously more powerfully and better.
Yeah.
So even if you were late, it doesn't really matter. Then there's a geographic angle. Uber and Lyft are the two big names people keep spitting about. But if you go to India, for example, Uber is doing okay. The local competitor called Ola is just kicking everybody's, gangbusters. And what they've done is an innovation. They said, most people in India don't have cars. If they do, the roads are congested. The fast way to get around is on a motorcycle or an auto rickshaw, a tuk-tuk. So what they've done now is they've got hundreds of thousands of motorcycles and tuk-tuks on their roster. The same platform that was working for cars is now doing auto rickshaws.
I'm sure there's an insurance opportunity in there.
Absolutely. So now you think about it, they were not the first to market, but they realized that the audience is looking for a fundamentally different way to transport themselves. Cars are certainly great, but there's no room for limos on the congested streets of New Delhi, for example. So they said, oh yeah, great, got the motorbike guy in, and bam. So no matter what Uber does or tries to catch up, they're already one level ahead. Even though they didn't invent the concept, so to speak, they were a follower, but a very aggressive follower. So I think it's a complex sort of yes and no answer to both things.
So our next question is from Kaizu. What's the elephant in the room in boardroom conversations around innovation?
In financial services, I think the tension point is that, yes, financial services is being disrupted. Yes, we need to innovate and we need to embrace that disruption. But to do that, we almost need to cannibalise our own book. So the things that have made us very successful and very profitable, and the number of customers we have and the large market share, you may have to sacrifice some of that. And when you're a listed company and you're on quarterly results and you've got analyst expectations, that tension point is quite difficult.
I would agree completely. I think it's the denial. Kodak in 1998, my wife is from Rochester, New York. It's a company town. Kodak, Bosch, and Lomb, Xerox used to run the town. From the city hall to every single services, you couldn't argue with these three companies. In 1998, Kodak had 176,000 employees worldwide. By 2004, they were officially bankrupt, gone. They had a 95% market share in 1998 in the printing paper business. And they had the technology for digital photography, but they were too busy defending their turf as opposed to investing in where the future was going, and that balance. And SAP has the exact same issue. We were an on-premise company. We were making billions in support. For us to go to the cloud, where suddenly people are paying us $50 a month per user, is a very painful transition, both for our customers and for the stock market, for us as shareholders. But thankfully, with the right, and that's where leadership comes in. I think with the leadership, the messaging to the markets, it's not easy, but that transition has been made, and absolutely, we made it as a company. We're coming back full speed, but it's not easy. It's a tough one to do, but mandatory. You have to do it, else you're like Kodak.
So thinking back to some of the conversations that we had in the boards that I've sat on for startup companies, there's way too much talk about the thing and not enough talk about the customer. And letting go of the ownership of the idea and seeing it in a broader context is the hardest thing for any organization. And that's a hard thing to coach, right? I mean, it's the same reason why eventually Bill Gates became the chief technology officer. He wasn't the person to drive the business when it reached a certain size. So it's that hard conversation to separate what I've innovated and what I've invented from how do I actually turn that into a cash stream without feeling that I've let go of it.
Awesome. We're going to wrap up shortly, and I'm going to ask the panel to sort of just grab something that we've spoken about today, sort of to highlight. Erica, if you, through your journey at Westpac, if you look back, and Steve Jobs in his occasional address said you can't connect the dots looking forward. When you're, now you've been through what you've been through at Westpac, and you can look backwards and connect those dots. What were the things that you wish you would have known or been a little bit more aware of when you first started out?
A few things. I'd say executive level sponsorship and involvement and engagement is crucial, and it doesn't end as soon as they've said yes, you can do it and here's a little budget. It's actually you're taking them on a journey as well, is very important. Be a diplomatic rebel is probably another one. So it's there's a real art and a science to this. You have to push boundaries, but you have to know when and how to stop within an organisation, because you run the risk of just pushing too far with them because you are taking them on a little bit of a journey. And probably the other thing is just being brave and bold. Like, it shouldn't be a scary thing to bring customers in to help them co-design something. It shouldn't be a scary thing to bring partners in or startups in and to not think that you have to do it and build it all yourself. So, be brave and be resilient and stick through the journey is probably the things I learned.
I think, keep the customer in mind all the way through to the end and be passionate about what the end result is. And, the whole building and construction, don't get lost in that and have all the battles and wars, to only lose what the customer really wants. I'll often say in the business that, don't end up with a Ford Falcon because nobody will want it. You got to keep it passionate. Things that people desire, that want to chase, and just never keep forgetting that the visual of what it's going to end like in the customer and push hard rather than compromise it. Because everybody wants to compromise it. The engineers get involved, the financial guys get involved, and they kill it. It ends up with something it didn't even, wasn't meant to be. So just be really, really passionate, because passionate products are eventually the ones that will win.
This is probably the best time in human history to be an innovator, a startup founder, a developer who creates something new. Cost of development is at an all-time low. Even in the last 15 years, my first startup was in 1999. There was no cloud. There was client-server, ASP. And we had to custom code every single thing. Now you can buy it for pennies on the dollar on Amazon Web Services and be done in 3 days. I would have to custom code for 3 months and then keep testing it, and you've lost half the year. So this is the second point. The rapid pace of innovation is so extreme that the agility that you have is a massive advantage when you come to creating enterprise applications. And don't be afraid of selling to the large customer cycle. The lead cycles are long, yes, deals take time, but there's a massive pot of gold that's potentially available to you. And manage your expectations, manage your cash. This is honestly very sort of sensical, common sense kind of things, but this is really what is now. The Economist had an article a couple of months ago. They used the word that before life started on Earth, in the pre-Cambrian period, whatever, 500 million years ago, there was only big, gigantic dinosaurs and then nothing else. And then something happened. And literally overnight, in the geological eon time frame, we had billions of species on the planet. And the analogy the guy was saying was that now is the right time for startups. They're coming up just like the way species came up in the pre-Cambrian period. The time is right, so conditions are perfect, and cost is very low. So take advantage of it and don't hesitate.
I think from my perspective, I mean, you live in Silicon Valley, so you won't recognize this possibly in the Australian context, but I suspect that culturally we are more worried about failure than we would be if we were sitting in Silicon Valley. So my advice would be, don't worry about failure. Failure is good. Right? Learn from every failure, but on the flip side, fail fast and probably fail often. Right? I mean, if you spend too long building a model, building a product in today's market, to pick up on Manju's comment, when we've got this pre-Cambrian explosion going on, right, you're going to miss an opportunity. You're going to burn through cash you don't need to burn. So fail fast, fail often, but don't be frightened of it.
Astro Teller at Google X recently put out his TED video. I think it was February. So you can jump up and look at it. But he talks a lot around failure and what he does. And they try and kill off a project from generally a feasibility point of view, like a technical feasibility. They're sort of doing 10x innovations, which a lot of us aren't doing. But if they can do that, he gives them bonuses. And even at Google and at Google X and out of Silicon Valley, it's
Facebook do it too.
At Facebook, it's still a concept that people need to talk about because failure is something that inherently, for some reason, is nobody's really that comfortable with it. So they have these sort of things in place to help them do that. Can we thank everyone on the panel for coming along?